Okay, this is going to be the video where I'm most condemning of all the flaws that I actually had through this project. Euroscope is a production company that I've worked with before, and in the past they have had similar problems, but they're not normally the really terrible ones, they're just incredibly annoying sometimes. The first of these is that they often get mistakes with people that they're booking or with equipment that they have. These are normally partially their fault. I can't put it all on them. It's stuff like the hotels that they had booked for them, or for me, were about half an hour away, so it means you have to drive, then get back. And it meant that for the first evening, it was quite a faff, and it ended up being really frustrating and annoying in actually what happened. The upside of that is, though, the next couple of nights it got very nice. I mean, they actually sorted out where we were staying. It was basically in eyesight of where the venue was, so we didn't even have to go that far in the evenings. It was quite a nice hotel, and it was very reasonable compared to the price of the other one, which had just been quite expensive, really. On the list of problems that there was, as well as that, there were also the actual aesthetics of the space itself. I mean, it was a big venue and it was expected to be filled with stuff, and it was. You did have the performance area and everything worked out nicely that way, but there were actual complaints by the top people organising it about the actual prison set, because it, especially in the time lapse, you can start to see it just looked like a building site that had Hessian put up around it from the outside. As far as a prison goes, it doesn't really look right. It looks terrible for what it was meant to be. The only reason why it's like that, and I can reason for it being like that, is because there was money removed from what the top people paying for it were passing down to pay for it. That meant that stuff like an external fence and different types of paint and cladding to go around the outside were not put on, which meant that it didn't look as good because there wasn't as much spent on it. As with the other projects, and particularly I think at the moment, Farnham, I always get the name wrong, is a project that everybody hates, and nobody's spending time and not an excessive amount of money on putting together something really impressive. That's not to say it shouldn't work, it's just that project is, it's not great. The other interesting thing is the structure. Whereas a lot of UCA projects have a very open structure, this one is quite a chain of command. I am probably the least experienced person other than some of the riggers, so some of the other companies that come in to help the company that I'm working for, I can have help from them and then ask them and guide them and, well, work with them to do stuff. So helping to put up nets, or helping to put together bigger spaces, or sort out equipment. Then there are more experienced people in the same company, which is Tom, which hopefully I'll have a small image to insert here. He is a company, well, I'm not sure whether he has his own company, but I know that he works independently. He has actually almost more kit than the company that we're currently working under has, and he actually lends some of it to the company because it's newer versions of cameras and wireless setups, so that you don't have to have cables running around. Also, he is very much of the technical side of the sound and the digital aspects inside of the van and working out cabling and etc. and along those lines. So a lot of the OB work, when it's not done by Steve, who was the person in charge of the entire thing and, well, was in charge of the entire company, he is the person that directs what is going on in the van. Normally when there's larger projects and the person in charge is trying to communicate with other people and discuss, he'll be the one that we're sitting in the van actually doing the cutting desk and all the editing software at the same time. There isn't really too much more to say about him. He's an independent camera worker, he has experience in that, and he also has a great knowledge of technical aspects of production, cutting soundboard or sound desk to an extent, and along those lines. He doesn't have a great deal of experience with set work, though he is beginning to learn more about the tools and techniques in that side because it helps him to understand his side. The next person is Steve. He is actually the owner of Euroscope Productions and was technically the person in charge of me, and then he had someone else that he was working for, and so on and so on. But he owns the company, so the vans, all the other parts of equipment he wasn't borrowing, and he was the person that collectively gathered all the lighting, sound, the big screens, and got everything organised on site. If there was a problem, he was the person that you normally went to, and then he went down to everything else that was happening to guide it. So he had stuff like the scaffolding crews come in and organised when they were going to be there. He was probably the second person on site after the actual company that he was working for. He would also have stuff like all the rigging crews would go to him, all the screens, if there were any problems, would go to him, and so on and so on. It's the key person that everything rotates around because everything falls back to him if it goes wrong. He's also the person that has a lot of the mistakes put on him, as if anything goes wrong, it's only really his work that is what's been done. It isn't like there's lots of other people that have been working on it and that's been responsible for getting everything to that stage. And the people that will only come to him and complain are the people then above him. So he is then employed by the next person up, that is called Mitch. I remember that name because there were a lot of times that he would go to Stephen with something that he wanted changed or improved. And basically he was the director, would probably be the correct term. Basically person that comes to saying, I want this, and demands everything. However, he's also the person that pays for everything below in what he's asking for. So he pays for all the materials, all the crew, and everything that is paid out will come through him as it goes down. So it's not someone that you can just refuse, but it's someone that is constantly annoying when they ask to help or do something, and really there is someone else that is better suited for that. It's just they're doing a job that potentially he could do, or potentially he is in the way of doing. I mean, he spent one day creating, I think, about half a dozen tables that have like 4 screws in. So it's 4 screws, maybe an hour a table for like a quick flat pack Wix table. It really shouldn't have taken that long, and it used up time, but it was something that kept him out of the way. So one of the things that my person in charge did, Stephen, would be to find ways of stopping him from interfering with all of the bigger companies. It's one thing that, particularly on this job, has been a thing of trying to keep people higher up happy, and not interfering with what they're doing. So he would be the person that would be the face of the company, and he would be the person that would try and get everything to run smoothly. and give them what they want. Mitch wanted to help, so he was helping. Probably not in the most productive way. The most productive way would be to actually guide what was happening better. I mean, for most of the time, there was a lot of stuff that could have been done more efficiently. But it was fine in the end because there was something. It was just not as good. The next stage up is the omnificent them, or higher up. I never saw them, and they were never really obvious to me. It was more sort of like the people in high vis that walk around. You don't really notice them after so long because everybody's in high vis. Health and safety always makes you wear bright colours because safety. But when they came along, they were the people that were actually paying Mitch to pay Stephen, who was in charge of the crews beneath him, that was paying the companies as well. They didn't like what was done because I believe what had happened is they decreased how much money they were giving to this particular area of the event, which meant that a lot of the materials in the actual set were dramatically decreased in what was wanted. So there was a lot less aesthetic stuff, like the internal sides were potentially originally wood, but they were then changed for the fabric screening, which actually works better and is quicker and more efficient, and personally I would say is nicer. But it's just that thing of, does it really look like a prison, or does it look more like a tent? What kind of feeling does it create? It was never going to be perfect because of how it ended up, but it could have been worse. It could have also still been better. It's still something that is not a perfect example of what could have been. I should also acknowledge anything that is my side of taking away from it. I always take away from productions with this company how I should behave and what things I can very quickly adapt and learn from. So where am I going to sit within a company like this? It's something that I have to ask myself, particularly with this one, is what are the people around me capable of, and what would I be or gain if I ended up working there? I would probably be a camera operator more than I would be what I want to be, because a lot of the exhibitions and stuff that they go to, it's very much a flexible working person that they want. They want someone who can use the cameras and operate in that area, but also for the days before that be practically capable in dealing with helping in construction of the sets. Or if not, be capable in setting up all the digital side so that when it comes to the performance, it's done. The roles that I currently fulfilled in that day were much more of the set. I'm still not good at cameras, and I've had past experience thanks to working in places like this, but it's not what I want to do. So I learned how to make the set, and it was interesting to do that. It's also something that is beneficial for me to know I don't want to do. So, summarisation of the project to fulfill the requirements of this reflection are: the project isn't great, but it could have been worse. The people that I've worked with are other people along my lines, though more based around the production and camera operating side. Then I had above me a boss for the set creation and a director boss for that, for the filming side, but it was sort of fluid between the two because he always just gave directions that were asked to be followed. Also, I haven't mentioned his past experience. He's always worked in camera, but he's worked on stuff like large production films and other documentations in a similar way. Above that, there was then a client, and then above that, there was then the client. There was then the person who was paying the client to produce work. As well as that, there were also smaller companies, but I was not attached to them, and I only really saw them as passing companies because it was done in such a way where there wasn't any necessarily collaboration between the companies or me. As far as it's concerned, it's quite good, but I don't learn much because it isn't perfectly adapted to making sets. Stuff like the Maidstone will be more what I want to do in the future, potentially, but I will find out when I do it. Okay, that's probably it for now, and hopefully that answers all the questions that I need to reflect on. I'm not sure because the list I didn't have up, but hopefully. A note for the last one. Reading through, I didn't mention how it was set up. It was a company that hired other I was part of a company that hired other companies and was hired to do a big show event where there was set and camera operating in Farnborough Air Show, or on the grounds where that is sometimes done. There was a large big open hall that is used for exhibitions. We went into that a couple of days before the exhibition, created and built the set, and then finished it off. So it isn't really a permanent facility, though the staff and crew that come in know what they're doing. They work on a range of different productions, so music festivals, they can do stuff like this. They can also go into larger buildings and do clubs, or they can go in and do conferences or fashion shows. Really, it's just anything that uses the equipment that they bring in, so they can set it up to do a big fashion light show or a nightclub with a couple of different types of light and how they're set up. So really, it's anything that applies the basic skills, just applying them to whatever is wanted by a client. Hopefully that does the side of what the facilities were like, but yeah, there weren't really any on site, so it was all brought in stuff.